Hi, everyone. Pastor Galen, lead pastor at Shine Hills Church. Thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. We hope that these podcasts will be a real encouragement to you on your spiritual journey. You can also connect with Shine Hills at shinehills.org. Hope you enjoy the program.
Across the street and around the world, Shine Hills.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the podcast. Nathan, welcome.
Good to be back.
Last week of May here, we're just kind of closing out May, and I don't know. Have you had a busy May?
Oh my goodness, May has been very busy, but also the weather's been back and forth. That's real exciting.
Oh my gosh, it's unbelievable. Well, actually, today's pretty nice. Tomorrow's supposed to be beautiful, so I've got some golf coming up. That hopefully I can. Those will be nice days. It's always
You're
nice.
A golfer?
Well, no, that's too strong. But I do golf. I do like to play. But
I gotcha.
No, there's a couple of tournaments that are coming up, and I like those scrambles. That way, you don't have to really, get one nice hit every once in a while. Then you use your shot. That's kind of fun. So anyway, and I actually got out and hit some balls the other day. So it was kind of nice. Feels a little springtime for me anyway. It gets my soul, kind of greens up my soul a little bit, I think.
Right.
But anyway, so how about graduates? Do you have any graduates in your family or extended family? Or?
No, not this year.
There's a lot of graduation happening. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Even tonight we're graduating a whole class of high schoolers, and they're in a big function for them. That's exciting.
I did speak at a graduation banquet last Friday night up in Casper.
Nice.
And it was a joy watching all of them. Some of the kids were just kind of playing practical jokes, and then a couple of them got up and just with tears talking about how they love everybody and they're going to miss them.
Oh yeah.
And it was just it makes your heart warm.
Yeah.
And hopeful. It was really good.
The enthusiasm, seriously, and I think. I haven't had a high schooler in my house for a while, so it's been a while since we've graduated. Our kids are 36 and 33, so it's been a while. But just being around that high school senior, there's so much excitement and so much hope for the future, and so much, it's just like this. They're just being shot out of a cannon and going into life, and you hope and pray for them, and you hope that the world doesn't unscrew the top of their head and put a whole bunch of junk in there.
I know.
And but anyway, it's terrifying for parents. It's sad for parents. It's exciting. It's a lot of change though. When it comes to graduates. But okay, so I guess on a sadder, sober note, we are this week and dealing with another school shooting, and you just go, man. There's some kids that will never have another day in school, and I don't know. Have you immersed yourself at all in knowing what's kind of going on there in Texas? And
well, I looked at probably the same reports everyone else has so far. That an 18-year-old gunman entered a school building there in Uvalde, Texas, an elementary school building, and wound up taking the lives of 14 children and severely wounding some others. Yeah. So that it looks like some of them may potentially also lose their lives.
It's just heartbreaking, tragic beyond. And the way that I understood it, I think I just heard this even today, that he went in and locked himself into a particular room. Is that right?
I didn't know.
Maybe I misunderstood. Yeah. I'm still trying to piece all these things together and exactly what happened. But man, just tragic stuff. But we were talking about the shooting, and then we started talking about some other shootings, and you go, and we were actually getting confused. Oh, you're talking about that. Is it
Sandy Hook, and then Columbine, and
you go back for sure. We were talking about that,
right?
And then we're just trying to remember some of the others. It's like there's been too many, way too many,
right?
I mean, any is too many, but it's like, what the heck,
right?
Everybody's trying to figure out this why.
Right.
What's your why?
Well, and that's one of those things too, where you look backwards in history, and there was a time where it wasn't like this. Yeah. And that's where we have to look, okay, where did the inflection point come? And you look back into the 1990s when some of these were where you first start hearing about them, like Columbine, and then I'm not exactly sure the actual dates there. I remember there was one in Jonesboro, Arkansas. And you look at, okay, what has changed in our culture? Yeah. What some people will do is they'll say it is the gun.
Right.
They'll call for all sorts of governmental change. Yeah. And yet one thing that you can understand is you cannot legislate this kind of horrible issue like this, a lot of times it becomes a political talking point for
Yeah.
all sides. And
Yeah,
so
that's true.
when we look at it, though, you look at the brokenness. Many of these individuals have suffered from terrible mental problems,
Yeah.
and sometimes we'll know that there's an issue, and people just don't follow up on those issues. But this is something that really has to be addressed across our society, and really what we have is a spiritual problem.
Well, see, that's where my heart lands on this, and I don't want to oversimplify it, but we're going to hear from all kinds of. We're going to hear the political world is
Right.
There's too many guns and we too much access to guns and all those things, and I'll just let all those guys, because they're not asking my opinion on that anyway.
Yeah.
But there's also there's some political things of who should be armed, and maybe the security things. There's all kinds of stuff that people evaluate, and it's caused us all to evaluate. We've got security around here. We've got on Sunday mornings we have armed security, and we have security around the building. We have cameras everywhere, and so it's changed the way churches do things as well because of this kind of activity. You go, well, we've chosen not to be inactive, at least to try to be proactive as much as we possibly can. And I think we got a pretty good system, but it's caused the world to change every time these kinds of things happen. But I do think that's a spiritual problem. And I do think, I don't want to oversimplify it, but it seems pretty simple to me. When you push God out of everything and there's no hope, and there's, who knows what kind of problems these people kind of go through, that you call it mental health, and that could be, but it could be, there could be a lot of social issues in this person's world. I don't know what what's going on in these worlds, but you ultimately have to believe that there is no God, and life doesn't matter, and my life doesn't matter, and you want to share in this pain, I guess. I don't know. It's just such a hopeless place, and desperate place. And I agree with you. It's a spiritual problem. When you say spiritual problem, what are you kind of thinking?
Well, here's what I'm coming back to. I think a lot of times people will look for some sort of public policy, or a political solution to something that's not a political issue.
Gotcha.
And so they'll wind up blaming the inanimate object for what happened actually through a human agent.
Yeah.
And so there is something bound in the heart of that individual that caused him to use that tool. It could be a lot of other tools potentially, if those other tools were available to them, to do great harm to someone else. Yeah. And so there is a deep spiritual issue, and it's written into the heart of whoever would do such a evil, heinous a crime.
Well, and see, that's to me what makes it a spiritual issue, because I think everybody would agree this is evil.
Right.
Well, evil has a source.
Right.
There's a source of evil, and that's hell itself. That's Satan himself, to try to get into the heart and mind of an agent.
Right.
To wreak havoc. And I know it's a sad state of affairs. A sad day in our. I've been thinking about those. I watched the news here at noon before we recorded this, and it's like, just your heart breaks for the people. I can't imagine. I can't imagine even the first responders having to deal with some of the things that they're exposed to.
Right.
These guys and gals are amazing.
Well, and that's where. So I was teaching. I don't have my notes with me, but I was teaching on this subject just recently, and it was anthropology. I'm using big words here, but anthropology and hamartiology. Yeah. And in that subject, it was actually just this last Sunday. In that, of course, we just talk about the doctrine of man, and then the doctrine of sin, and how sin marred the image of God, in which God made us. And so you can't understand mankind without sin, or vice versa. Right. But in this, you go back through all of the several Greek words that are used for sin or iniquity in the Old Testament. And oftentimes there's a word used, and I don't have it right on the tip of my tongue, but it's a word that talks about simply missing the mark. But then there's another word that's used, and it talks about genuine evil intent. Yeah. And it's the idea of a brokenness, something where a person has gone so far
Yeah.
where it's more than just missing the mark.
Right.
It's that every thought and deed of that individual has now reached a place that is truly evil.
Well,
Yeah.
and what it said, in Noah's day, they were only evil all the time. You remember that?
Right.
And so the intent of a man's heart was only
Wow.
evil all the time. And it makes you wonder if we're not approaching, some of those. There's so much evil, and it's almost like it has unconscionable evil. It doesn't have even a conscience tied to it, or remorse, or it's a level of evil that you go, wow, this has got to be from this. Humans can't come up with this kind of evil on their own, in my opinion.
Agreed.
It's got to have some help.
Right.
But I was just reading something the other day, and it talks about how you mentioned harmartiology.
Harmartiology.
I actually know what it means. I just couldn't say it.
Yeah, right.
That study of sin, and really everything goes back to that sin. Right.
Exactly.
And even this truth, we're talking about this, the idea of truth in our sermon series, and that idea that man is born with this sin problem.
That's right.
If you understand that starting point, and that the sin separates us from God, that's what separates us. Nothing else separates us. It's sin.
Right.
And we've got this sin problem. And if you think that, no, we're basically born good, you're never going to understand what really separates us from God. That's the wrong path.
Right.
And so I really think I don't know if it's the essence of truth and understanding mankind, anthropology, but it's a big part of it.
Right.
What your starting point is.
And I think partly the reason I go that direction is when you look at the entire letter that the Apostle Paul wrote to the Roman church.
Okay.
He lays out how sin, in chapter 1, he talks about how sin came in, and the fact that there is sin, and sin applies to all men, because everyone, the invisible attributes testify that there is a God, that testifies that there is a natural order to the world around us. And when people work opposite that order, they wind up destroying themselves.
Right.
Chapter 2 and then chapter 3 also begin to point out that even people that think they're righteous, if they're and he was actually addressing people that had tried to keep the law perfectly and so on. He continues even dismantling. So it's not just people that did not grow up around understanding the law because they're in some foreign culture.
Right.
He then comes back even to his own culture, the Hebrew culture.
Right.
Then by Romans 3:23, he just makes the simple statement, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And in that, he actually in the church to Galatia wrote this in Galatians 3:10, for all who rely on doing the works of the law are cursed, because it's written, cursed is everyone who does not keep on doing everything written in the book of the law.
Right.
And so anyone who could keep the law perfectly, I mean, you take the 10 commandments. Can anyone truly say they have kept at all times every one of all 10 of those commandments?
The rich young ruler did. Other than that, I don't know of it.
Right. But even that particular statement, the question of, I've kept all of these things from my youth.
Yeah.
Okay. When did you start? Because,
that's true. That's a good point. I never thought about that.
Right.
But,
and so what he comes down to it by Romans 6:23, again, Romans 5:12, he points out how because of one man, sin entered into the world, and death by sin.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then he points out again, so death passed upon all men, for all have sinned.
Right.
He makes Romans 6:23, for the wages of sin is death. So now we're looking at over and over again, he's saying everyone here has something bound. It is now part of your humanity.
Well, and the central figure in all of this is sin.
That's right.
And, a lot of times we break things down. It's like, well, or we explain it in such a way, even give it labels so that it's like, well, now we can explain it. So it's like, it's not sin. It's like, no, it's sin.
Right.
That's the issue that we're dealing with here. And the problem with sin, if we go back to the first part of Romans, what I was wanting to pick up on, the verse that really always grabs me is when God said, and God gave them over.
Yeah.
After a hunk of time, after they would continue on down this road, it says God gave them over. And I'm not exactly sure. I have no idea who that happens to and when that happens. He just says it happens.
Right.
But it's like people that are just, if you want to call it, hell bent on sin, right?
Right.
They
Exactly.
It's like at some point God just gives them over to their own depravity.
That's right.
They
Yeah.
don't recognize or not trying to even struggle with this
Yeah.
this sin issue or recognize that they're born with a sin issue. And and of course that's repentance. That is revival. I think it's the only thing that could possibly break through. But I don't know if we'll ever see that. I don't know if this is the hard part for me. God's invisible attributes. I can see those invisible attributes, his power, his, gravity is invisible, but I know it's there. The order of the universe, those are invisible. His attributes, the beauty we see of the green grass and the green sprouting out of the trees, this beauty and all these things. So I can see the handiwork of God, and that's his attributes. Just so we can see his handiwork. We don't necessarily, but I'll tell you, it's hard for people to attach. We can do it theologically because our belief system, but it's like, okay, sin is on the rise, and then chaos and wickedness is going to be on the rise as well. We can make those correlations,
right?
And then we as preachers are saying, yeah, so we need to repent. We need to get back to the fundamentals, the basics of believing in God and trusting in Him and worshiping Him and not whatever. And if we do that, of course, we are maybe a little idealistic, but if we do that, then God's going to bring order back or whatever. And it's like, I don't think people correlate those two. You have to have a spiritual eyes to see that, because we see it in Scripture. Right. And we say, guys, can we just try this once? Can we just put God first but it's
what's so tragic with all of that, a lot of times people wind up blaming God then for the problem. And when you look at the verse that you just talked about there in Romans chapter 1, where God gave them up or gave them over, literally the word is paradidomai autos in the original language, but what it means, paradidomai, literally means to give up, but autos means self, to give over to themselves, essentially. And what happens is when God gives someone up or he gives them over
to their own mindset,
to their own mindset. And so ultimately the person responsible is not God.
It's not
for
God,
the consequences of sin.
That's
it's yourself.
a great point. That's a great point. Yeah.
And that's that tragedy. And that's what drives a person with a pastoral heart to go out and warn. It's like a fire that burns within you. You can't help yourself. You just got to go out and warn people about the danger they're placing themselves in. Yeah. And again, then it becomes something larger. You wind up warning a culture that over and over again is pushing against truth and pushing against things. And eventually you look at that culture and you can see them throughout history where eventually they're given over to themselves. Yeah. And it's a tragedy.
Terrible place to be.
Absolutely.
And I don't know if it explains everything. I don't know if it explains everything, but it explains a lot of the journey that man is on and some of the things that we deal with, even the tragic things. I think that we give ourselves over to our own rationale instead of God rationale, our own reasoning instead of God's reasoning. I've been, trying to, when I write in the letters to these graduates, and I'm writing in there to, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not lean on your own understanding. That's one of my, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. It's a great verse for a graduate.
So good.
And, because if you lean on your own understanding, it's like, sometimes you just got to say, well, I don't know. This is what God says. And I'm going to stick here, even though I don't fully understand it. Right. Right. And not all my friends aren't believing this or whatever, but I'm gonna hold to this truth, and that's I don't know. I think God looks for those few, and they're out there. Absolutely, they're out there, and we have to continue to encourage them. But it's there's those that have fallen deep into the self-absorption of sin.
And when you look at that, you look at the effect of sin then on a place like Uvalde, Texas.
Okay, yeah.
And so people will ask, how then does a Christian respond to this? Yeah. First of all, this is a terrible, terrible tragedy.
Oh, man.
And I can't even imagine.
I can't. I got grandkids, and I those flashes. It's like, I can't even imagine.
Absolutely.
What the families are dealing with right now.
Right.
It just breaks my heart.
Yeah, I received a phone call today talking about death from a loved one. whose wife had carried almost a full term and then lost the baby yesterday.
Oh, wow.
And this is the second child they'll have to bury.
Oh, gosh.
And when I look at that, and you look at the
hard.
tragedy, it breaks your heart, and there's not a whole lot you can say to someone who is suffering like that. And I do, of course, pray for them, called my wife, and we prayed together on the phone. And when you look at something like at Uvalde, there is no way to put that into human terms, the tragedy. And so I think every Christian first responds and says, yes, this is tragedy. This is brokenness.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, then we don't turn to a political solution.
No.
Everybody talks about, how there should be, government is not God, and government cannot reach in and fix all the problems of the world.
True.
And in a culture that has forgotten God, oftentimes what we do is we still search for God. We just call him something else. We call it government, and
That's
government won't fix it.
interesting. That's interesting.
So what we need to do then is look at, okay, what really is the inflection point that began to cause all of this? Was it the Second Amendment? No, we didn't have any of these kind of shootings in time past.
Yeah.
We're talking about something that is a phenomenon that is more recent. That's not the answer. What we do need to do is recognize the role of the Christian to get out there and share the gospel with every creature.
Yeah.
To truly show them that there is hope for their life. And one of the things that we haven't talked about really is the hero in that was a Border Patrol agent. From what I've read, and I don't have all the details, but that Border Patrol agent rushed in to bring this tragedy to the swiftest conclusion possible.
Wow.
By the way, that has to be said. When a tragedy like this begins, you've got to bring that tragedy to the swiftest conclusion possible.
Wow.
This Border Patrol agent was a hero in this
Yeah,
circumstance.
risk his life for
He
sure.
didn't wait for anyone else. He rushed right in and brought it to a close. And so I'm very thankful
Oh,
that
for
there are
sure.
people who are willing to risk their lives
my
to
gosh.
save the lives of others.
You know, that's really true. There's some people, we talk about it, and I don't know. I wonder how these Border Patrol agents, how police force, how the sheriff's department, how do you know maybe until the action actually starts happening if you're a person that runs to
Right.
tragedy or you're trying to run away? But those are special people.
Yes.
That risk their lives for another. And, there's a verse for that actually. So
Yeah, amen.
greater love has no one than this, that he laid down his life. And this isn't even a friend. This is just love
Right.
for somebody else. But,
Right.
well, our hearts are broken for this terrible tragedy, and we are praying with those folks in Texas. And I know many of you that listen to this have the same response. You're just heartbroken, and you're saying, God, please help us to weather this and comfort those people, and hopefully for protection for all of us. And in the meantime, we challenge you every week to be strong and very courageous. God bless you all.